Hi, I'm Ian Trevethan. I am the Education and Outreach Director here at the Sternberg Museum of Natural History.
And I'm Brad Pinka. I'm Manager of Visitor Services and manage the store.
And this is A New Way to Museum.
So today it sounds like we're going to talk about toys at work.
So we are two well-qualified museum staff members to talk about toys. Everybody who knows me knows that I have a thing about toys. So I collect toys, and my friend Brad here
And I
sells
sell
them to me.
toys to people like him that plays with them.
So what we're going to do today is sort of do a comparison of the way dinosaur paleontological toys, science-based toys, have changed over the decades. So I've got some very old dinosaur and other creature toys to compare, and then we'll sort of compare through the decades. So I tried my best to pair some of the more popular animals with their counterparts over the years, but I did have to get creative with some. So those of you who are dinosaur species experts out there, I understand that some things don't quite match up, but we'll do our best. So I'm going to start over here at the left of our collection, where I've got a group of pachycephalosaurs. So we'll start here. I'll move my horned dinosaur out of the way. So, and what we're looking at here is, this is the oldest one here. So this is early 1980s. Unfortunately, I don't know the manufacturer of this one. So this is what a pachycephalosaur toy would have looked like in about probably 1982, let's say. So about the time I was in second grade, I would have been playing with something like this. So as we fast forward, here's a pachycephalosaur from 1990. And one of the cool things is you start to see more colors and more detail. And you also see a change in the stance. How cool is that? So dinosaur science or paleontological science reflected in the stance of this figure. Now, the two out here are from the 2000s, I believe. One is from, excuse me, 2013. One is from 2017. I believe this one is...
That's about the newest.
Yeah,
Yes.
This is the newest version. And this is pretty close to that. And the reason I've got two very different looking dinosaurs, this is a Dracorex, this is a pachycephalosaur. And there is some discussion. These may actually be the same dinosaur. This just may be a younger version with very different looking, what we call ontogenetic features, or basically age markers. So that's why I put them together. And one of the things that I really kind of wanted to note with these two figures is the amount of detail is really good. These are both, I think, made by Safari.
Yes. Yep.
And the color. You really start to see very interesting color patterns. And that, again, comes from recent research, both about color and structure and, sort of looking at contemporary animals now that are related in their evolutionary bracket, and noticing that modern animals are colorful as well. So that's reflected in the colors that you see in these later figures.
How about the 1990s version? That we actually sold here up until just a few years ago. Do you have any idea of the reasoning of the very different color scheme of that?
This is interesting. Well, I don't know about the color scheme. I think, in the 1990s, there was sort of, not necessarily with this particular dinosaur, but there was some notion of relationships between dinosaurs and birds. And so I think at that point, somebody somewhere, or multiple somebodies, thought, wait a minute, if there is a relationship to birds, look at the kind of variation in color and display that birds show today, and even some reptiles. Why couldn't dinosaurs have those kinds of markings and colors? So I think that's really when this idea started to come about. So you start to see some pretty wild coloring. The other interesting thing about this one is you notice its head is down, and it's almost in a ramming position. That's because, and it still might be a discussion today, I'm not an expert in pachycephalosaurs, but this idea is that these animals would ram their heads against each other, sort of like modern rams do. when they're competing for territory and mates or whatever. We're not sure that that's really accurate. Some researchers have looked at the skull bones in that area and have decided that the skull bone is much too thin for that kind of action and would actually cause a lot more trouble if they were ramming their heads into things. That also plays into change of sort of form and shape as the animals grow older. So this would be a juvenile or a young pachycephalosaur, according to that idea or hypothesis, and then this would be a more mature one. So as they grow older, their heads dome over more, they reabsorb some of the spikes, and again, this is an idea or hypothesis that is in the process of either gaining support or losing support and on its way to being falsified. So it kind of depends on where the evidence leads us. So just some interesting ideas. At this point, this is being presented as Dracorex, a completely different species, but we're not sure. So kind of interesting stuff, just from the eyes of a paleontologist. So our next animal or dinosaur in this group is Triceratops, which is a very popular dinosaur. So as it turns out, we don't have any Triceratops current toys in our selection right now because we've sold out, because Triceratops is, I think, one of the most popular dinosaurs out there. But we do have some good representations, and we'll get to that in a minute. So my oldest Triceratops here is from 1975, and this was made by Invicta Plastics for the British Museum. And you can see there's some interesting detail. It's definitely more crocodilian looking to me. The tail is pointed down or almost dragging. It's very drab, not a lot of colors. Although I think this sculpt is actually, for being 1975, it's actually pretty well detailed. But you'll notice that they've added, and I don't know if this was a creative liberty or if this was the predominant hypothesis at the time, but they've sort of added crocodilian-like armor almost, what we call osteoderms on the back here. I was alive in 1975, but I was about 3 years old, so I was not an expert in dinosaurs. So I don't know what the predominant theory on what the form and function was like for Triceratops at that time. So we jump ahead about a decade. So this is from 1988. And you'll notice that this is a well-used toy. So our Triceratops is missing a horn, so he's a Diceratops at this moment. So this is from 1988, and it was made for the Carnegie Museum. And I think there is some relationship between the Carnegie toys and later on that would become Safari. But we'll designate this according to what the information on the toy told me. So this is made for Carnegie. And you can see you've got a little bit of a change in posture. We've lost the crocodilian-like osteoderms on the back. We've got an upright tail, which is nice, but it's still very drab and lizard-like or reptile-like, I guess, as far as coloration goes. And then the next one is interesting. This is a model kit. I can't remember what was the maker on that. That was an AMT ERTL model kit. This was made by my friend Mark Logan, who is an incredible model maker and assembler and painter. So I don't know if the date labeled was the date that this was assembled or if it was the date that this model was manufactured. It's a little closer, I think, in form to the 1975 Triceratops that we looked at earlier, in terms of there are these interesting sort of almost armor or osteoderm things, plates on the back of this Triceratops. But as far as detail goes, we've got a much closer idea of what dinosaur skin looks like. I think at this point we had found samples of skin impressions, so a little bit better of an idea of what dinosaur skin looked like, but not a lot of color. So these are two horned dinosaurs, we'll call them ceratopsians. that are not triceratops, but I brought them out because I really liked the examples of color. So here you start to get that bright coloration that becomes more prevalent in later life reconstructions of dinosaurs. So moving on, we're going to go to our stegosaurs. Stegosaurs are also a very popular dinosaur. This is a Jurassic dinosaur, about 150 million years old. So this is really great. This actually came from our collections, our historical collections. This is a 1950s dinosaur figure. This was an exclusive, basically you would send in your cereal tops.
Okay.
And you would get your cool dinosaur toy. This looks like it's brass, very, very die cast. But this is your very. I'm going to put this up here. So it's very lizard-like. You can kind of see its legs are sprawling a little bit. Its tail is dragging. It's kind of got. It almost looks fat to me. It's got a big belly. So that was what stegosaurs looked like in the 50s. So we're looking at nearly 70 years old toy, which is the oldest toy I've been able to scrape up for this. So then this is, let me double check the date on this. I believe this is interesting. This is from 2019. So this is, I'll just leave that there. So again, we start to get some interesting coloration. We get some good color patterns. You'll notice that the tail is way up. There's a lot more detail. And then we get to our 2010s version of stegosaur, and then you start to see that wonderful coloring. You get a lot of detail. You've got a much more dynamic stance with the tail being raised up. So again, just changes in the way we understand biomechanics and ideas of what these animals might have looked like as far as color and display. So moving on, we've got, this is a iguanodon. So again, this is probably one of the earliest and again, a very well-known
70s,
dinosaur.
late 70s, by 1980.
So this is 1980. Again, this is by Invicta Plastics for the British Museum. So, by the end of the 70s and early 80s, we were still, they were still pretty drab. You can see that the tail is dragging. And some of that may be because it's really hard to get a two-legged toy to stand up. So that there may be a mechanical purpose. But generally, it looks like, the tail is dragging on this. And then as we move to the 90s, and this would be post-Jurassic Park, I think that helped a lot with the dynamic looks of dinosaurs represented in toy form. So you start to see different colors, you see a lot more detail. You can see that they're trying to sort of portray the tail as being lifted up from the ground. And then this is our 21st century version of that same critter. And you can kind of see what I was talking about, trying to make a two-legged toy stand up. It doesn't work so well. So these animals may have been quadrupedal too.
That's another fact with this one that you notice a lot of, they do have to take some artistic license since it is a toy. I mean, as you see, the tail curves down to create sort of a third leg or something for him to stand.
Well, and it almost looks like on this one that they intended it to be sort of suggesting that these guys could switch from 4 legs to 2 legs as needed. So that may be a reflection too of research and the sculptor of this particular figure trying to sort of say, hey, we're aware that this animal could do both. So that's kind of cool. Our next dinosaur is, of course, going to be T-Rex. You couldn't have a dinosaur toy discussion without having a T-Rex. And again, I was able to find a specimen from the 1950s. Again, this is your cereal box top exclusive. And this is what a T-Rex would have looked like, in the 1950s. Notice one of the things that I'm really noticing is its arms. First of all, its arms are way too long. It's got too many fingers. And it's standing upright with its tail sort of dragging on the ground, very kangaroo-like. So again, this was how T-Rex was portrayed, I think, for quite a while. This sort of two-legged thing with big arms, and it was sort of the scariest dinosaur ever. And that really probably sold a lot of toys and sold a lot of movie tickets and so on. So 1950s to
1977.
1977. So again, I was alive for this. I would have been about 4 at the time that this thing was made. This was made by Invicta Plastics, again, for the British Museum. So again, a single color, very drab, a little less bulky. They started to reduce the arms, and they got the number of fingers correct, which is 2 fingers, because that third digit's very reduced in T-Rex. You still have a tail dragging on the ground. Again, in the defense of the model maker or toy maker, it could be a practical feature to try to get it to stand up, but it really does look like the tail drags on the ground, and it's not very dynamic. And then we get to our 21st century version here.
That's actually one of our newest ones.
And
the feathered T-Rex.
The feathers.
And you can
now this is our first figure that
of
actually has feathers with dinosaurs, which is a huge thing in paleontology in general. Is you get a lot of theropod or meat eater paleontologists saying, hey, why don't we have dinosaurs with feathers? So, raptors in Jurassic Park, they really need to have feathers. So in this case, they're showing T-Rex with feather-like structures. Again, you've got the dynamic color patterns and, of course, the very, very reduced front arms and a tail that, for the most part, is raised up and not touching the ground. Again, for practical purposes, the T-Rex is more upright, where I really think it should be sort of almost straight across for counterbalance. But when you're making a toy that has to stand up, there you go.
Actually,
hey, wow! That was operator malfunction. Sorry, operator error. I was wrong. I take back everything critical I just said about this sculpt. This is awesome. All right.
Tylosaurs, mosasaur.
So yeah, we're going to move on to our mosasaurs. And mosasaurs have had a rough time of it in the toy world. I forgot to bring down my Jurassic Park mosasaur, but that's okay because it's not very accurate. But this is a mosasaur from 1991, so that would be the year I graduated high school. So this is 30 years old, and you can see it's very crocodile-like almost. And then as we move on, let's see if I can find the date on this one.
Those are fairly recent. Those are
so this is 2010.
Yep.
So this one is, what's the date on this?
I think that one's fairly new.
2017,
Yep.
And then what is the date on that?
This would be about 2010. This one we got to mention specifically. This one was actually designed by one of our curatorial staff, or he was their consultant for Safari. This was part of what was called their Carnegie collection. They discontinued their Carnegie collection, some arrangement between the two companies, I don't know. This was, as I said, modeled after what we have upstairs, which made it really cool. I think it's a really neat looking one. So this was
a lot of Sternberg influence.
So we have
on
a
this.
lot of Sternberg influence.
So
on
one
that
of the
guy.
things that has changed quite a bit is the shape of the tail and the shape of the limbs to reflect much more digit-like limbs with webs in between those digits, and sort of much more dynamic body form. Sort of a sleek swimmer, as opposed to, in the 90s you have this thing almost looking like a crocodile, which is not quite accurate. These are very snake-like creatures that move through the water by using that sort of back and forth motion, and I would imagine when they decided to move quickly, they moved quickly. So again, these two reflect different ideas of color pattern. I think this is a little more realistic. Most sea critters that you see are colored dark on the top and lighter on the bottom, and the reason that is for camouflage. So if you're a predator looking down in the water, it's going to be much darker looking down, so it would be advantageous to have a dark color pattern on your back, and then as you're looking up, the light is shining down from the surface of the water, so it would be a lot more advantageous to have a lighter coloration on your belly area, and it's sort of reflected in these as well. So this much more so. This is fun because it looks like a tiger.
Yep.
And we're the Fort Hays Tigers. Yay!
Here we go.
So there we go.
Okay.
So that is my nerdiness for the day. Any nerdiness you would like to add to that?
Well, Ian's our paleontologist, so he had to come in and explain this stuff to me. I just sell them. I can't tell you about them that much, but thank you, Ian.
we could go into American action figure grading, all that kind of stuff, but I don't think we have time for that.
Not today.
Not today. Some other day. So thank you for
Yes.
visiting with us. A lot of the 21st century versions of these toys that we've been talking about are available in our gift shop. So if you are visiting or you happen to be local and want to get some of these newer dinosaur figures for your own personal collection, this is the place.
Yep. Some new ones coming in too on the next truck, so I'm anxious to see that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining
Thanks.
us on this version or this episode of New Way to Museum, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for joining us in A New Way to Museum with the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell for notifications when we release a new video. Support us on Patreon for early access and exclusive content. You can also follow us on all our social media. Links are found in the description. Thanks for watching, and follow your curiosity to new discoveries.